Welcome, everybody, again. I think we got that, but either way, first item on our agenda is a roll call. This evening, we have Mr. John Beckett, we got Michael Costello, we got Judd McIntosh, myself, Phil Ruck, we have Lisa Buck with us, and we have Krista Swincer online. Next up, acceptance of the agenda. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Very good. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion, additions? All right, hearing none. Jessica, please.
For the approval of the agenda, Lisa Buck,
Yes.
Phil Ruck,
Approved. Yep.
Judd McIntosh,
Approved.
Michael Costello,
Approved.
John Beckett,
Approved.
Krista Schwenzer.
Approved.
Good.
That's 6 for approval, none opposed.
Thank you, Jessica. Next up, approval of the minutes of December 20th, 2023. Can I have a motion for that, please?
So moved.
Very good. Can I have another second?
Second.
Very good. Thanks, John. Any edits, comments?
I have a couple of edits.
Okay. Fire away.
On the first page, near the bottom, there's a sentence that reads, with regards to natural resources and trees, there are, it should say no wetlands as opposed to now wetlands. Okay, so that's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the 5th line up from the bottom.
Got it.
Okay, and then on the back, under item 4, in the next to the last line, we have in paren, October 2016 or most recent edition, not most revised.
Good catch. Very good. That it? On your
That's
end?
it.
Any other comments? All right, I guess we're ready again, Joyce.
The approval
As
of-
amended, yeah.
For the approval of the minutes of the December meeting as amended, Lisa Buck,
Approve.
Phil Ruck,
Approved.
Judd McIntosh,
Approved.
Michael Costello,
Approved.
John Beckett,
Approved.
Krista Schwenzer.
Approved.
That's 6 for approval, none opposed.
Very good, thank you. Next up, new business and public hearings. We have 2 in front of us this evening. First up is an amendment to an approved subdivision by Forest Orono Associates LLP for the Forest Hollow subdivision located on Grant Road, tax map 9, lot 15 in the low-density residential zoning district. The application proposes to recreate lot 19 from a piece of retained land on the western side of Grant Road as it was shown on the originally approved subdivision plan. And these, this should look very familiar to everybody as we've been doing this a number of times. So I do understand that this is the last we shall see of this, which is a good thing. So is a applicant or a representative here, or typically they haven't shown? Oh, Mr. Benson, do you want to come up and tell us a little bit about what you propose? Please, yep.
So the light turns green. Oh, I got you, hold on.
Oh, okay. Yes, just to add lot 19 back into the subdivision,
Yep.
and it is the last one. I haven't been to a meeting since before the COVID. And I just wanted to come today and thank everyone for being patient. It's been 14 years that I've been working on it.
Mhm.
And I caught the 08 recession. So it set me back 10 years. And if there's any questions, be glad to answer them.
I don't think we have any, but this has come before us so many times now, should be old hat, but I think if you would like to, Isabel, if you want to provide any summary, just to rehash for the public to understand.
Yeah, I'm waiting to be promoted in the meeting to have a presentation. There we go. I'll just sort of show the subdivision plan just so you know what you're looking at.
You can take a seat if you like. Thank you. Deb.
Thank you.
I won't run through my whole presentation, but I do just want to sort of let you know where we are. So this is on Grant Road off of Forest Ave. This is the last lot. It's the one that's highlighted in blue up there. This is, as was mentioned, a request to essentially re-subdivide and add lot 19 from the original 2006 approval back into the subdivision. As was mentioned, the applicant has been before the board a number of times on this application, and this is the sort of final lot that could be split under the 2006 approval. It's this is the actual subdivision plan that was submitted, and it's the crudely highlighted one up in the corner there. That was my highlighting job. There's not a lot of review items here. Frankly, there's no building proposed. Any future building would be subject to review by the code enforcement officer under a building permit. So really what we're looking at is that required lot dimensions have been met. And as shown on the chart in my memo and that's on the screen now, those requirements of the land use ordinance have been met. Oh, and I do just want to add the amended subdivision plan was reviewed by the Maine DEP. The overall subdivision previously received site law approval, and the applicant did provide a copy of the final SLOTA amendment approval for your review in the application. The final lot is served by private water and sewer. It's a septic system and a well, so private. And they have shown the proposed well location and the proposed leach field location on the plan. And they're proposing overhead electric, which is currently available on Grant Road. There is one thing I just want to flag. It's not applicable. It's not like a formal waiver, but the applicant has indicated that submission items related to flood data aren't applicable. Staff concurs because this isn't within the floodplain area. And we have just recommended sort of typical conditions that have been provided to all of the re-subdivisions of lots up to this point. All of the findings from the original planning board approval from July of 2006 and any conditions of approval remain in place. And then the applicant is required to file a signed amended subdivision plan at the Registry of Deeds within 90 days of approval of the amended plan. That's a state statute requirement. Other than that, I don't have anything else necessarily to add. I understand you've seen this a number of times, so.
I will comment, Isabel, we had a brief discussion before you arrived in Orono to help us out. But we just talked about a situation like this that it's helped out the applicant but they've come back several times. So this seems to be an issue that I'm not sure. It'd be nice if there was a streamlined way that planning board didn't have to review this. So this is just, again, banking an idea for the comp plan, or maybe a discussion about that. So just please put it on your radar because we've seen any number of these over the years, as Mr. Benson said. So but I'm not certain that this requires our input, in my opinion, and we've talked about that. So. All right, before I open up the public hearing, any questions for Isabel, for Mr. Benson? Nope. All right, I'm gonna open up the public hearing, invite members of the public to step up to the podium and say anything. Any people online?
There's no hands raised online.
Okay. No other discussion from the
Was
board? I'm
There's one,
very good.
yeah.
Please step right up. Yep.
Hi, this is in relation to the contract zoning agreement for buyers.
All right, so different hearing. If you hold on for just a little bit, you'll have your opportunity. Nope, thank you, though. Are there any comments on this application? All right, nobody online?
No hands raised.
All right, close the public hearing. No further comments. I do believe we have proposed findings of fact for us this evening.
Yeah, that's correct.
And do you want to, is there anything that we need to know about other than what you've told us? So for a motion?
Nope, I don't believe so. You know, you're always free to add additional conditions, but I don't think that's necessarily warranted here. So
We have not previously, and I don't see a reason to add additional conditions. Does everybody agree with that?
What about the suggested condition?
Just, those are, yeah, the recommended conditions, and those will be part of the record. Yep, yep. And I think you've been putting all your conditions on the back of the findings of fact, is that correct?
yes, I've been adding them to the bottom of your
That's what I thought.
proposed
I'd seen that
findings.
with the other ones too, so. Okay, then, I think we should be ready for a motion. You take a stab?
Yeah, but now I just lost my piece of paper.
You got it?
Yeah, that's good. I propose that we approve the minor subdivision amendment application for Forest Hollow subdivision lot 19, tax map 9, lot 15. How do we do the findings of fact again?
If you wanted to follow the suggested findings, you could just say with the findings of fact and conditions of approval, as provided to us in the meeting packet.
With the findings of fact and conditions of approval that were provided to us in the packet.
Very good. Nice. Very good. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Very good. Thank you, Mike. Further discussion?
For the approval of the Forest Hollow subdivision amendment, Lisa Buck,
Yes.
Phil Rock,
Approved.
Judd McIntosh,
Approved.
Michael Costello,
Approved.
John Beckett,
Approved.
Krista Schwenzer.
Approved.
That's 6 for approval, none opposed.
Good, thank you. All right, next up, we have another another public hearing. This is a site plan review, shoreline and zoning and floodplain management application by 74 Mill Street LLC. Authorized agent is Wentworth Partners and Associates, Inc. This project is located on 74 and 80 Mill Street, tax map 27-12, lots 33, 35, and 36 in a contract zone in the MDR zoning district. The application proposes to renovate the existing Buyer factory mill and adjacent building into a total of 30 residential units with on-site storage, parking, sidewalks, and landscaping. So for the applicant, we changed our process a little bit since the last time you were in front of us. And our town planner, Isabel, has prepared a summary. So what we're just trying this out. So rather than duplicate what you're gonna say, if you let her do a summary and then we ask you. Ask you follow up, so. great. So-
Perfect. Okay, this is a bit longer of a presentation than my last one, so just bear with me a little bit. So as was mentioned, this is for 74 and 80 Mill Street. This is a major site plan, a shoreland zoning and a floodplain management review. The overall project summary is, of course, renovating and converting the existing Buyer factory mill and the adjacent building at 80 Mill Street into a total of 30 residential units across the two sites. That includes on-site storage in the basement of 74, parking, internal pedestrian sidewalks, and landscaping. The 74 Mill Street is in a contract zone that I understand that you all have had a public hearing on previously. That was approved by the council in January of 2023. And then the 80 Mill Street property is in the MDR zone. You should also be aware that the properties are within shoreland areas. So this red is the general development shoreland zoning district that you're I guess it's more of a, I don't know, light pink. And then the green, which is at 80 Mill Street, is the limited residential. It's also within the flood area that I'll show on the next slide. So this is the overall site plan for the property. And I guess it's a little bit hard to see, but essentially the light blue where my cursor is running goes sort of right adjacent to the boathouse here is the limits of the FEMA flood zone. So there are some local standards that you should be aware of. And then this is just an overall view of the first floor. The other floors look fairly similar to this, you know, an entrance off of Mill Street and then apartments in the rear. I also just want to clarify, actually, while we're on this slide, that I understand that during the initial contract zone phase, there was some conversation about doing commercial space here. That is no longer being proposed. So they had sort of asked for a little bit more than is being proposed now. They've scaled back the project a bit. So within this property now, there are 28 units, and then in the adjacent 80 Mill Street, it's a duplex as it's being proposed. So like I mentioned, 74 Mill Street is under a contract zone with the applicant that was approved by the town council back in January of 23. And the multifamily dwelling, but no more than 30, is an allowed use under the contract zone. The contract zone also stipulates a variety of unique dimensional standards specific to the 74 Mill Street property. Essentially, they're required to meet or exceed the dimensional requirements of the Village Commercial Zoning District, as well as the Shoreland General Development District. Overall, the floor area is not allowed to be expanded except for any emergency ingress and egress, and the decks and patios that are specifically located adjacent to the 5 Summer Street parcel. And that's sort of this area where my cursor is now, next to this part of the building that was already existing. And then the maximum number of bedrooms per dwelling unit was 3, with no more than 5 3-bedroom dwellings across the entirety of the 74 Mill project. In terms of other sort of review items that you all have expressed that you like me to talk about, in terms of trees, wetlands, and natural areas, the Stillwater River is essentially the north boundary, and that's probably the most prominent natural feature of the site. Of course, this is a redevelopment project, so there are no wetlands within the project area. There are 3 trees that are greater than 12-inch diameter at breast height. Those are the only trees that applicants are required to actually show on the site plan under our standards. Is any that are larger than that, and there are 3 proposed to be removed with this application. 2 are 13-inch diameter maples, and then an 18-inch diameter maple. All of the existing trees within the 75-foot shoreland setback are actually proposed to be retained. And then tree removal has essentially been limited to the areas of the proposed development and the snow dump site. And additional landscaping is proposed to surround the parking lot area. In terms of traffic, access, and parking, the applicants have submitted information around peak hour and then daily trips. So the peak hour estimates are about between 13 and 23, and that would be, you know, peak hour is generally considered to be the hours of about 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., like peak commuting hours. And then they have estimated a total of between 203 and 239 daily trips across all hours. They had also submitted information from DOT, which tracks average annual daily traffic. That's sort of an averaged out measure of daily traffic on a street. So they've split Mill Street into Upper Mill Street and Lower Mill. Upper Mill is about 1,800 trips a day, and then Lower Mill is about 600 currently. Vehicular access into the site is from either Mill Street for the ADA accessible parking spots proposed, and for the 2 spots for the 80 Mill Street units, or from Spring Street for the main parking lot. In general, I think we're all kind of familiar with this site. The main parking lot is essentially the area of the existing gravel on site. And all except the new driveway into 80 Mill Street are existing access points. The fire department, as part of the staff review, has reviewed the site plan and determined that access for emergency vehicles to navigate the site is adequate. And then in terms of parking, the contract zone stipulates a maximum number of parking spots that can be proposed. And then, as you're aware, our ordinance stipulates minimum. So the minimum required is 49 and the maximum allowed is 60. The applicants are proposing a total of 57 parking spots. That includes 3 ADA compliant parking spots, which are proposed to be located on the 80 Mill Street parcel, but they're proposed to serve the 74 Mill Street parcel. And that's just a function of where the entrance to the 74 Mill parcel is. And I mentioned the rear parking lot is essentially the area of the existing gravel lot, but is proposed to be paved with concrete, which is a requirement of our ordinance. And then in terms of drainage, stormwater and erosion control, they are proposing an additional 3,491 square feet of impervious surface to the 74 Mill and 954 square feet of additional impervious surface on the 80 Mill, or about 4,400 square feet total. Since this project is disturbing less than an acre of area as a redevelopment project, and it doesn't add more than 20,000 square feet of impervious, which are the thresholds for Maine DEP, no stormwater permit is required from them. Currently, stormwater on site flows to the Stillwater River located at the rear, and they're proposing a bio berm at the rear of the site to better retain stormwater before it gets to the river. They're also proposing erosion control silt fencing at the rear of the site. That's basically to protect the river. Our engineering peer reviewer also suggested some additional erosion control, which the applicants have since added to the plan at the bottom of Spring Street. That's really to protect against runoff from construction traffic. And of course, both of these controls will be installed prior to any construction. Okay, so then in terms of lighting and signage, currently signage is proposed on the light poles only. Our ordinance requires that that's reviewed by the code enforcement officer. And then we have, as you're aware, some existing lighting standards in our ordinance, but the contract zone here actually stipulates, I guess I would say more restrictive lighting standards or additional lighting standards. And they have determined that those have been met with the plan submitted. So they've said that the proposed light fixtures will be warm lighting with timer control boxes for automatic dimming in the evening. That all lighting fixtures are downcast or shielded, and that the lighting proposed adjacent to the properties with frontage on Mill Street will be reduced or turned down to meet the foot candle requirements that were set within the contract zone. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more when we get to the suggested conditions, but the lighting plan is currently tentative. They've expressed to me based on lighting availability. If something were to change, they would need to submit something updated, and I've suggested a condition to that effect. Okay, in terms of waste, water, sewer, and other utilities, the existing buildings are served by public water, which is available in Mill Street, and public sewer, which is currently available on site, sort of through an existing main that runs across the rear. Both the Orono VZ Water District and the town's water pollution control superintendent have provided capacity to serve information that they can serve this proposed development as part of the application materials. The applicants are proposing new communication and natural gas utilities, which will be undergrounded. And then the electrical utilities are the existing utilities that are the above ground electrical lines on Mill Street. I do have one thing for, I guess it's sort of for discussion. I don't know that it's a formal waiver, but there's some contradictory standards in our ordinance that I'd just like to bring to your attention more than anything. So some of the standards in the shoreland area require, the quote is approximately 20 feet wide internal travel aisles within parking spaces, parking areas, and that spaces will be approximately 10 feet wide and 20 feet long. But then our typical site plan review standards require parking spaces that are 9 by 18 and require a 24-foot drive aisle width. The applicants had submitted some additional information around this item, citing the American Institute of Architects, who typically require a 24-foot minimum aisle width. I think at the end of the day, because they're proposing 9 by 18 spaces and a 24-foot minimum aisle width for this parking area, it sort of all comes out in the wash, I guess, for the best way to put it. So if they were proposing the longer parking standards that are set by the shoreland ordinance with the smaller travel aisle, it would end up being the same amount of total impervious surface as the requirement from our typical site plan standards. Just so you're aware, we have considered this, and the town's public works director and our engineering peer reviewer generally concur with the justification that I just provided and have indicated that they'd be more comfortable with the 24-foot width. So I don't know that it is a waiver per se. I think I noted it to that effect in my memo, but it is sort of something that I found that is contradictory in your ordinance. So just be aware.
What is your advice? I mean, should we do the waivers? Fine, if that's the way we're gonna do this. This is the first time I'd ever seen this. It's interesting, but at the end of the day, 2 feet on the parking stalls, it adds up to the 4.
Yeah,
So-
so in general, the sort of standard, as I understand it in the shoreland ordinance, is the desire is to limit impervious surface in that area. So I think ultimately you don't need to necessarily make a formal like waiver finding. As I drafted my findings, I just cited the amount of impervious surface, and I would rely on that in terms of your findings here. But
Yeah, I mean, this is the type of thing we usually defer to our public works and public safety. And if they're okay with 24 and then the 18-foot length on parking stalls, that seems reasonable.
yeah,
Thoughts on a waiver request? This is something new. As long as it's, on the record, we've talked about it, staff has done the review. I'm okay with that. What do others think?
Yeah, I think it's okay. I mean, the minutes will reflect that we discussed this, so.
Yes.
Yep.
And procedurally, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, the
Wa-
same-
Waiver or no?
It's the same, I don't even know if we need it. I mean, it's the same amount of impervious area.
Right.
Yeah, it's
So-
just how long the stripes are,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah.
yeah. I just wanted to bring this to your attention. I mean, more than
Sure.
anything, just so
Yep.
you're aware, like technically it doesn't meet the 18.274.7C, but it is all the same impervious surface. And you're right, it's just the length of the
Yep.
parking stalls.
Yep.
So.
So your thoughts, again, I just.
We've been made aware of it. We're fine with it.
Okay, John,
Same.
Krista, do you have anything to add? We're okay with, we're discussing no waiver request. See a nod. Yep.
He's just muted on her.
Yeah, you're muted on your end, but we can see you nodding.
Thumbs up, we're good.
Okay.
I'm fine with it.
She's fine.
That.
Okay, Lisa just asked a question.
Do we need to
again.
change this when we redo the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, I would say it would be more of like an ordinance cleanup because it's contradictory, but ultimately shakes out as the same amount of impervious, so.
When we did the comp plan the last time, that's when you find a lot of your ordinance mistakes. So if we tabulate all those and fix
Yeah.
them when we
Yeah.
Yeah.
do that, good.
I do have a number of recommended conditions. So the first 5 that you'll see in my draft are sort of our standard conditions of approval. Of course, the approval is dependent on the plans and everything agreed upon within the application. Any changes have to return to the planning board. The applicants are required to obtain a building permit from the code enforcement officer prior to construction. We have been requiring all applications for site plan and site plan review to hold a pre-construction meeting prior to the issuance of a building permit. And at that point, we'll also talk about erosion control measures, which are to be installed according to Maine DEP's best management practices manual. And then just a note about noise. Noise is regulated in accordance with the town's ordinances. It's Chapter 13, Article 2. Applicants and their contractors are well advised to familiarize themselves with that section of the town's ordinances. And then there are a number of unique conditions. So the requirement for a condition related to flood management for review in perpetuity and for that to be included in the deeds, that's a specific condition that's required by our ordinance in section 18-238E. There is also a requirement for the application for the additional curb cut at 80 Mill Street to be reviewed by the code enforcement officer. The code enforcement officer, as this is more of an FYI in perpetuity, the code enforcement officer may require lighting to be removed or modified once installed if it's been found to cause any glare. So if there are concerns about lighting from abutting property owners, they should contact the code enforcement officer and file a formal complaint. prior to any issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the 74 Mill Street project, an easement for the ADA parking that is to be located on the 80 Mill Street parcel rather is required. Temporary structures that might be needed during construction also require a permit from the code enforcement officer. Signage is required to be reviewed by the code enforcement officer and in accordance with our town ordinances. And then the note that I added about a final lighting plan being required to be submitted and approved prior to the issuance of any building permit, since they had indicated that their current lighting plan is tentative based on availability. Okay, I think that's all I have. Sorry for the length on that one. And the applicants and their representative are here.
Just a reminder to the public, we're trying this, basically, some transparency issues, just making sure that all the information, the town process, what town staff has done in preparation for this meeting is all laid out. So now it's the board's job to review the standards, confirm that items are met and have a discussion, but we're trying something a little new here. So Isabel is preparing the long summary. And now we're going to put you on the spot and just ask you, do you have anything to add to that? Anything you want to highlight that wasn't necessarily in Isabel's presentation? One thing I want to add to your list of things that we usually discuss, and that is buffering and screening. So I know it's on the plan. I saw you had a short section of fence. We'll get into that, but that is a topic that comes up almost without fail. So just add that. So you're up.
The green light's on, so I'm good.
You're good.
All right, perfect. Well, number one, hello, my name is Zachary Pike, and I brought this issue in front of the board last year as we looked at this property that was a non-conforming property in an area as something that we could potentially do with it. And as we progressed down that area, it was wonderful to work with you guys on getting the contract zone change for the area. It was wonderful to work with Kyle last year when he was working, and it's been very nice working with Isabel this year. Thank you very much for your guidance and working through this process as my other representative, Steve Gavoni from Wentworth Partners and Associates, has been working very well along the process to make sure that that review that you gave and the issues that had arisen through the process, that we were trying our best to identify those and just make sure that any issues that the community may have in the screening areas or lighting areas or sound areas, that we'll make sure we address those properly so that's not an inconvenience to everybody, the best that we can through the process. So thank you very much for everybody's time. We really are looking forward to renovating and restoring this historic building in the downtown area and adding things that I think that are just demanded really by the density and adding housing to our area. So thank you very much for everybody's time tonight.
Very good. Do you have anything to add?
No, I will agree with Mr. Pike that we've been in this process since early November with the town staff and with Isabel. It's been a fantastic process. It's just amazing how much knowledge that the staff members have. They love this town, and that really showed in the process. Isabel came in as a hired gun, and I'll tell you, she's a gunslinger. You just heard her presentation here. Every I was dotted, every T was crossed, and there's some other letters that got extra stuff on them too. So she did a fantastic job. She's tough. You guys are really blessed to have her on board. So thank you.
Yeah, we like our town staff. So
Yeah, yeah.
all right. Any questions from the board before? So I guess I'm gonna ask you on the screening. It wasn't highlighted. I saw one section of fence, which you had the graphic there. You had the picture of it, but could you just elaborate for the board again, because screening is an issue we usually talk about. But
a couple of the areas around the property, I can understand there is some wooded areas, so we can add the areas of wooded space that we need to have. And then this area is a potential concern. We purchased 5 Summer Street when it was for sale last year, and to give us the opportunity to, if we need an easement on the property, to add for a screening or fencing, we'd be very happy to do that in a fashion that works well within the ordinance or within, how close the proximity is. Obviously, it's already a non-conforming structure being so close to the property line.
Mhm.
So I think that was already addressed in the contract zone change. And we're, whatever we need to do, 6 feet, 8 feet, whatever it is that everybody seems to agree is the appropriate thing to do. I mean, we're happy to do it.
Mhm.
I think that was,
Yeah.
does that address the
And
issue?
and then a lot of the other, that buffer, again, is property owned by this collective.
Yep.
But,
I saw other trees to remain. I saw that, yeah.
a lot of, we're not really taking down a lot. I think, Isabel had pointed out, there's three maples, and I want to make clear, those were all three that met that criteria of over 12 inches at 4.5 feet above base. Those are all Norway maples. Norway maples are now on the invasive plant list. So we are removing three invasive trees. We've got a few more that we are removing around this deck area, all of them Norway maples. So because that is now on the invasive list, we're actually told to remove them from properties. And then back in this area where we have, where we're gonna do the snow dump, again, we've got, it's mostly Norway maples. There are a few black locusts back there, again, on the invasive plant list. So we're taking out the bad for the most part. And as Isabel had pointed out, we're not touching anything within that 75-foot buffer zone between us and the Stillwater. And we're complementing to the existing tree lines along the property borders with the properties along Mill Street. And we're not touching any of the trees back here with our neighbor to the west of us.
So along those lines, in the buffer strip that you talked about. So I saw you're converting an existing wooden building to a boathouse. Right. And I'm just looking at a boathouse that far away from the shore, figuring that, well, there's going to be a path, or I'm just wondering what the plan was to get.
I think
get
we've
boats to the
affectionately
river.
called it the boathouse without a real end goal plan with exactly
Yeah.
the existing structure that's there. It's a historic structure that has
Yes.
been there for an extended period of time. We don't exactly have a plan for what it could be. I think our intentions are maybe kayaks and canoes maybe be able to store it there, and maybe individuals that live here could go to the water and use the water that's there, but we don't have a defined plan of what to do.
I'm just thinking of the Tyler Tech building and what the University Motor did before, that they created a path down to the water with a
Right.
gazebo, and that's mostly to remain. But I looked at the boathouse and the distance between that and the river, trying to figure out what you were intending. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen what other areas in town have done with either docks or other things. I don't know, we'd have no long-term goal of what it really is.
Mhm.
But it's a natural, it's a resource, it's wonderful. The river's fantastic. I think everybody in the community enjoys it. And who knows what that could be in the long run, but I think right now that's not what we're not trying to present that, like we call it the boathouse. I think more
Okay.
for
Storage, yeah.
storage.
You take canoes and kayaks associated with whoever's renting or leasing. Yep.
And then I got another one. Let me go on the lighting. So it looked like you had some discussions with council. There's a lot of items in lighting and in conditions about cycling on and off. Did that include? So I wasn't sure if in the application, I thought it referred to building lights. Are the parking lot lights also on the dimmer? So those are off in the middle of the night?
Yeah, so two-phase dimmers. So the dimmers are controlled by the first set, I guess, first phase of dimming are controlled by optics or by light. This time of year, they'd be turning on around 4 p.m. and they'd be shutting down at 10 p.m. But on that type of a timer, as it gets lighter out during the day, there'd be 6 p.m., later on, and 7. And
Yeah.
by the time we get into June, they'd automatically be not even going on until 9 p.m.
Mhm.
And then, as you said, then they're on a solid timer after that, which would shut them off between I think it's 10 to 5 was our goal. So they'd actually be off at that time. Yeah. So there's 2 sets of timers built into this.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure if it was just building or if the lights going off 10 to 5 also included the parking lot, because I imagine that.
Yeah, we
right.
focused on the parking lot because that's,
Okay,
we felt that was really what was going to impact the neighbors here more than anything
that's
else.
why I'm asking, yeah.
Again, we got a nice solid hedgerow here. But yeah, the building lights, that'll be something that we do present. Once the architect is caught up to where we are with site plan, that's what we'll be presenting to the CEO, a better lighting plan so he can understand the lights around the entrances. And all the entrances are in this courtyard area.
Yep.
So that's where the lighting would really be the most critical for us.
Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, and circle back to the screening. So the contract agreement does say that there'd be a 10-inch vegetative buffer between the primary parking lot, and I'm assuming the back of those 3 houses.
Mm.
But it's not clearly defined that there's a true 10-foot hedgerow or something in between that parking lot and those houses. I would think that would minimize greatly the light. And the contract zone seems to imply that that should exist.
Again, easy enough.
Yeah.
Right now, what's there is a steel building.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not gonna
So
stay there,
once that
correct?
steel building,
Yeah.
once that steel building comes down, and there are
There's some trees in there.
there's some trees in
No
there,
elevation
some mature
difference.
trees, but they're on a pretty steep slope that's been, it's on a lot of fill slope coming from the upper
Okay,
properties.
so the property line, this is where, so that back of that property line, are you saying you don't own property that's kind of at the top elevation? So you could actually run that hedgerow that goes down the side and then across the back? Do you follow me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so that,
So I turn the sighting plan here, yeah, you can see that that drop is pretty quick, so for some of the lot, using 80 as our starting point
Yep.
here, 80 is, we've got buffer there. The next lot, to the east, the hill is basically on our property, but that hill starts to encroach on the other 2 properties, so that it really drops off on the upper properties before our property after that first lot. So these last 2 lots are really higher, much higher than our lot and
Right.
where the
So-
property boundaries are, just because
So
that
fence
that hill
isn't
shape
going in,
went back here.
yeah, I mean, if the fence is down in there, yeah,
I'd also like to add, in that area, and maybe other community members can correct me, it seems fairly heavily treed between that parking lot area and these other surrounding houses. Currently, our plan would not be to change any of that wooding that's there. And perhaps, I'm wrong, but if we need to add some more trees or add a fence line,
We've been
Happy to-
Yeah, we've been pretty consistent with other projects, the old Main State Police Station. Basically encouraging the developer to work with neighbors to provide a sufficient buffer. And we didn't detail exactly what that was gonna be. They ended up working it out themselves, but again, this comes up really frequently. The Dunkin' Donuts over on Stillwater Ave, it was a similar discussion with fencing and the height of fencing and what was appropriate. So again, this is something that it comes up quite frequently. So again, those issues, but understand that, you heard them when we did the contract zone public hearing. There's people interested in your project, but being good neighbors and figuring out a solution is a good thing.
from my version, and maybe it's not everybody else's version, but my version is there are quite a few trees between the back of these 3 properties. And if there needs to be more, happy to help, or if it's a fencing or something, I wouldn't want that hold anything up. I'd be very happy to figure it out to make everybody, happy.
Right.
We're trying to keep the parking lot to less space than it currently is, if we can.
Yes.
We're trying to minimize it all in every way possible, but we want to meet every requirement that the planning board requires.
Yep.
But we also need to meet the requirements the planning board requires. So if we need to bump it down a little bit, that's not our goal. But if we need to,
Yeah.
other situations, happy to do it.
Yeah, I think how we approached that the last time, I think it was a condition of approval, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
That with basically, well, with the Main State Police Station, we didn't prescribe the actual screen or the buffer. They worked together and I think the project ended up coming out nicely. I haven't spoken with the neighbors or the other place, but
I think there's good opportunity here. Again, we talked about that steel building that's coming down. This will be the first time in,
Yep.
50 years that they've seen what their views are going to be without that building in the way. It might be interesting for them to see that before we
Right, so rather than prescribing
collaboratively
something,
come up with with a screening plan after that. Because again, that's going to change their view in a
Yeah, it's
major.
fair. It would block the river potentially.
Yeah, I
that's a
wouldn't
fair
want that to
statement.
be the goal either. They're
Yep,
gonna finally
that's a
have
fair statement.
access, visual access to the
Right.
river.
Yep.
That they might not have had before. So I think that's where, as Zach was just saying, I think that's where opportunity lies. We can really work with them and,
so that seems like
working
a
around their
It's a fair
views.
statement. Yeah,
condition of approval to evaluate or come up with some way to assess that after that building comes down, because we can't really picture that now,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure that the neighbors can. So maybe would that
agreed. Yep,
seem reasonable?
yep.
Okay, that's just one item. Other questions from the board before we open it up? Krista, anything? Can't hear you.
I'd like to make a comment. And
Yep.
that is, in looking at the landscaping that's planned. First off, I'd like to say it's creative and, it's nice to have the amount of variety that's there. So I think, overall, it's a good plan. There are a couple of plants on that plan that I think the landscape architect or whoever put it together should reconsider. And that is because I suspect landscaping is not going to be carefully tended. It's going to have to exist on its own pretty much. And the iris that's planned there is a wetland species. It needs a lot of water, and I don't think anybody's going to provide it with the water it needs. And ditto for the lobelia. The lobelia also is a plant native to wet areas. It might be well along the edge of the river, but it probably won't thrive in those flower beds. So I think the plantings will work better in the long run if those are reconsidered.
I did see your plan said subject to change, so I saw that on the note.
Well,
So Chris,
I
Chris is
might
our
know someone,
resident.
I might know someone to
expert.
bring on board here. So that's good.
Now, we have a lot of expertise on this board. Krista is always right on. So something to consider. Any other questions from the board? We're gonna open up the public hearing. Thank you. Invite anybody to come up and tell us who you are and what your comments are.
I'm Ray Thomas. I live on Mill Street. About the property that they're talking about. The only question I have is Spring Street. It's narrow and it's dark. Is there any talk about lighting on Spring Street? And at the end of Spring Street, I don't know if you're familiar. I know you guys are, but
Sometimes there's limitations, of course, on what they own versus what the town owns. So it could be a right of way issue, but if you want to tackle that one right now.
and the end of Spring Street, the town put big boulders to keep, so they wouldn't keep pushing the snow.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's gonna interrupt your plans or not.
Yeah, do you want to just address that? I'm not sure that you can do lighting outside your property.
Right, yeah, that,
Typically not.
so, yeah, Mr. Thomas's concern was actually one of my concerns when we were looking at the lighting plan, because obviously the restrictiveness of this contract zone was that we had to be at a half a foot candle at the property line. And of course, the property line isn't exactly where the road starts. There's still that buffer that's within the right of way. So he really is speaking the truth when we say it's the end of Spring Street gets a little dark comparatively. So if this board has the power or authority, then I would say I would push our light so we could light it a little more. But other than that, I'm going to follow the letter of the law and make sure that we're at 0.5 foot candles at the property lines.
Did that make sense? They have limits, so they have to meet the conditions, the contract zone. So I'm guessing a conversation with our Public Works director might bear some fruit. So, thank you. Other comments, questions? Don't be shy. Could you please step up?
John Eden, I live on Oak Street. I'm concerned a couple of things. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I haven't seen this quality of drawing for this project. In other words, all I've seen is little things. It's very hard to do that. And I think it would have been rather nice if there could have been an opportunity to have these pinned up on a wall where people come in, see them, and then you can make a sensible kind of comment. Anyway, without looking at this, I'm assuming from what I'm hearing that all the entrance for these cars will be on Spring Street. Is that true?
I think a majority, just handicapped access, was going for your new drive to park close to the building, right behind the one house. That's your
Okay,
500
so-
square feet or whatever it was, yeah.
So as I understand it,
Yeah.
the existing, what might be called entrance to the buyer property is going to be a road that leads into a car park, right? In addition to this, no?
Could you help us out? So he hasn't seen the plan, so if you could get to the right sheet and just point that out for him, that would be really helpful.
That's all.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about.
So this,
All right, so I apologize too. For the record, this is recorded, so if you could speak up somehow, try to just speak loud enough so that we get you in the mic.
I'll
that would
shout.
be- Yeah,
Don't worry
sorry-
about it.
Sorry.
so I didn't catch your last name.
Eden.
Eden. So Mr. Eden's question was, he's just looking at the site plan and trying to understand how we came up with the design for entrance and exits for vehicle traffic. So primarily, the majority of the cars are going to come in and off of Spring Street. And this is basically the existing parking lot that was used by the factory for 50 years or so. So that's where we're reutilizing that, including taking down that steel building again and using that area also for parking. So the traffic on Spring Street would be similar to when the buyer factory was at its full capacity, which again goes back many, many years. And then we also have and this is at a lower elevation. This is down low compared to Mill Street itself. Up at the Mill Street, we have the entrance for our ADA compliant parking up top, because we do have the handicap ramp entrance to the building here, and then another one at the very front of the building along the sidewalk. So this handles our ADA compliance. And then for 80 Mill Street, we have a single driveway that will handle the second floor unit of 80 Mill Street.
Okay, so that brings up, opposite my house, there's a property that has been, Mrs. Gardner's house. 5 Summer, is it? Yeah, 5 Summer has always been a residential property. It looks as though nobody's living there at the moment. I'm concerned. I don't know if this is, obviously this is not part of this project at the moment, but it concerns me that that may become another entrance or exit to this property. It wouldn't take much to pull that building down and have another driveway,
Right?
which then,
Unfortunately-
can I just?
Yep.
As far as I'm concerned, as a resident, it's all combined. I mean, I may be jumping the gun on what's going to happen to it, but it seems, I'm trying to point out that what I'm concerned about is the entrance and exits of this particular property. And at the moment, there happens to be one. I mean, let's not count the ADR, all that stuff, because that's not going to be very many people. But I can see a time when there might be some pressure to allow this other property to become an exit or an entrance. And that then messes up a whole slew of problems with Summer Street and Oak Street and so on. And not only that, but my property, part of it is Canal Street. Just a short part of it. And I would be forced to close that. It's convenient for other people in that area, but I would be forced to close it because I don't want people coming through that way to get into this particular property again. Okay, so I just want to put that
Right.
as where I'm
Do-
coming from.
And this happens frequently, but we are only allowed to review what they've proposed in the
Oh, I
plan.
know that.
Yeah, no, I
know that.
want to be clear that, we're bound by just what is.
Yes,
being
I understand,
proposed.
but
Yeah.
what time, I've been in situations like in a couple of towns, small towns. What happens is these things happen very fast.
Mhm.
And sometimes the town committee doesn't know anything about it. No, they don't know that somebody has objected in the past or whatever and whatever. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could just speak to the process quickly, I think that also makes some sense here. So if there was to be an amendment to that 5 Summer Street parcel, they would need to return to the planning board for further review there. So that would need to get reviewed by this board as an amendment to the approved plan set, just so that the public is aware. And you would be noticed as you were at this point.
And then if I can add just from the practical standpoint, we just talked about the grade changes. There is a substantial grade difference between this existing driveway and where our driveway are. As a matter of fact, we have a retaining wall
Mhm.
back here, so just the amount of capital that would have to be spent to do what he was talking about would be pretty extensive. And again, knowing that would not only have to go through this whole design process again, which has an expense, but also, our gain, there's no gain for that for us at this time. We did consider a lot of ideas out here when we first started, and that one just didn't financially make sense to us. So our goal is to actually turn this property back over at some point, because what we really needed it for was that buffer zone that you had talked about earlier. That was really the whole purpose of holding on to that property.
Well, while we're on that topic, and I know you don't need to file any stormwater permits, but there was a mention of a bio berm, and could you address or just point out what stormwater controls that you are proposing, just again,
Yeah.
to help alleviate any issues?
So, when you look at stormwater controls, we think of structures as being the principal way of doing that. So whether they're dry wells or catch basins or, what have you. In our case, any one of those putting in any one of those structures would actually been below the floodplain. For our floodplain, which changed on July 13th, last year, But our floodplain elevation out here is 79.4 feet above sea level. And for us, you know, our driveway, we're at 80 feet right now with this parking lot. So so the limit of what we can do for stormwater design needs to be surface flow in this case. So that's what we're doing, is we're moving that surface water like it does today. I mean, right now it's a gravel surface, but and due to the ordinance, we're going to a paved surface. So we're moving it, we're gonna move it across the parking lot and then into the bio berms so it can be absorbed above that floodplain elevation. And then we have the 75-foot buffer beyond that, which is all vegetated. So we're not looking to remove any of the vegetation within that buffer zone either. And that is truly a buffer zone.
Yep.
So that's how we're handling the stormwater here. We're letting the bio berm be the filter, and then the natural, I say natural, that's not quite true. We have a railroad bed that was there, and then we have a canal that was filled in. So there's not a lot of natural out here, but that 75-foot buffer really becomes our stormwater control.
Thank you. Other questions from the audience?
Good evening. My name is Payson Welch, 23 College Ave. I'm also the president of the Orono Residential Community Association. Just for everybody else here, that's a nonprofit which works to protect the interests of the residents. For tonight's site view replan, I've prepared an independent analysis to the best of my ability. So, I've asked Town Planner Isabel if she could present some documents on the screen.
Just gonna throw this out there. Typically, we reserve, a length of time for comment, because we do have an audience here this evening. So that's fairly standard. So I'm not sure how long you have for a presentation, but just please keep it brief. And if you would not touch on some issues that have already been brought up, that would be helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So
thank
I did speak to the town planner earlier, and she did mention that. So I'm going to limit my time to approximately 5 minutes. That's what I'm going to do here. That was her suggestion. And she did mention that you all like to receive documents ahead of time. I did mention that the packet was not available online until last Thursday or Wednesday evening. So in the future, if that's available sooner, I can get these documents to you guys at a time. So I did provide you with a printout with some of my analysis and the questions. So let's see here.
I just want to ask, are you an engineer?
I'm not an engineer. I am a software engineer with 30 years of experience. And so I'm a highly technical professional. And the nonprofit interest part of my life is the fact that this planning board has approved some decisions which affected myself and my neighborhood. And we have a board which myself and some neighbors decided to start this nonprofit to help prevent prevent what happened to us from happening to other residents.
Just do want to be clear, so the
Yeah.
board understands you have no credentials in traffic engineering. Is that correct?
No, I'm here exercising my First Amendment right as a resident of Orono.
No, understood.
Yeah.
That completely,
No, that's fine.
just
So-
want context.
Yeah, that is correct. I don't have any credentials. What I am going to present though, are the excerpts from the 11th edition of the Institute of Traffic Engineers trip generation report.
Mhm.
I'm going to demonstrate how the calculations are performed for trip generation estimates. And then I'll make a comment on that. So just to recap here, the applicant and or the representative has submitted the trip generation estimates for okay, I can only really talk about LEC 220. I don't have a copy of the engineer's handbook, but the AM peak and estimate was 13 trips. The PM peak was 15 trips. And on this page, I just want to note that the trip generation rates are 0.3 vehicles per bed for the morning peak and 0.45 for vehicle trips per bed for the evening. Can we go to the next page, please? So this is an example from the ITE, the Institute of Traffic Engineers, 11th, or sorry, this is actually from the 10th edition handbook, but this shows an example of what is provided for samples. So if you're talking about LEC 220, you go look this data plot up, but this is an example of how what these data points mean. At the very bottom, there's a best fit regression equation. It's the optimal mathematical relationship between two or more related variables. So it basically provides an equation. If you could go to the next page. This is a sample problem. There's a couple different ways to calculate this information. One of the ways is the third line from the bottom is T. In this example, it's T 1.86 times 25 equals 45. And this is only for the sample problem. So the line that I want to call out, though, is the last line here. It's that is the regression equation for vehicle trip ends. Next page, please. And this is the data plot for let's see here, multifamily housing, low rise, not close to rail transit 220. So basically this has the facts and figures needed to calculate the trip generation. At the very bottom, if you could scroll down a little bit more. There's the fitted curve equation T equals 0.31 times the independent variable, in this case, is 30 units. The representative presented information of 28 units, but the application actually proposes 30 units because we have 28 in the main building and 2 in the other building. So that is one thing to note, is that their estimates were 28 and they should actually be 30. So using that equation, if you could go to the next one. I should note that that previous one was for the peak hour between 7, so that's the morning 7 and 9. This is 4 to 6. This equation is T equals 0.43 times the independent variable plus 20.55. And next page. So these are my calculations. Now, I did establish, Chairman Ruck did establish that I'm not a traffic engineer. And I believe I did catch an error in my own math here. But when we, the error is the equation here. So I went back and reviewed what should have, what the calculation should have been. It was those equations that I wrote out. According to the instructions on that first page, the sample page, or I'm sorry, on the second page there, where they did the sample problem, they basically said, you just take that equation, you plug the inputs in. At least that's my understanding as not a traffic engineer. So my values here are a little off, but I can correct them right now. For the AM peak hours between 7 and 9, the equation on should start T equals 0.31 times the independent variable plus 22.85. And so that would result in 33 peak trips during the AM instead of 13. And for the evening, for the next calculation there, should be T equals 1.04, T equals 0.43 times the independent variable plus 20.55.
I'm skipping ahead to the last page and I see you've got 6 questions and
Yeah.
we're almost at 5 minutes. So
Okay.
do you want to cut to the chase? And there's 6 questions. We don't have a lot of time for you to go over the calculations. I just want to make sure that you have enough time
Well,
to get to the.
I want to make sure I'm being thorough here. So the short version here, and the thing is that the facts here matter. So as you can see, I've got the calculations, 33.45, sorry, 34 is the actual calculation if you use that linear regression. So the point here is that the estimates here are 13 and 15 for LEC 220, but it's closer to 30 for each, 30, 33. There's a that is according to,
You're at about 6 minutes now.
oh, thank you for reminding me. I told you that, I try to keep it around 5. So, do you want to hear my comments or?
That's why I'd like to hear your comments.
Okay.
The engineering and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Again, we have a town engineer that
Mhm.
reviews things, and there's a stamp plan that's been provided for us.
Yeah.
Town staff has also reviewed that. So I do appreciate the detail that which you went to, but with limited time, I'd really like to hear your larger
Okay.
concerns so we can address them.
Okay.
That would be helpful.
No, that's fine. And so the questions, I'm just going to read these in, and then what I spoke about this with Isabel is that when you want to answer them, like towards the end of the meeting, you can go over them. That's fine. I don't need answers. So I'm going to just read this in. I do have some comments. First comment, section 18-172 states that notice of the hearing shall be published in a newspaper or general circulation at least 10 days prior to the hearing date. Section 18-172 2 states that at least 10 days prior to the hearing date, a written notice of said hearing shall also be mailed to owners of the abutting property. The notice includes a link to retrieve the actual details of the application. So that's the Google Drive, or actually I think it's the town website, which links to Google Drive to receive the application. Notices were mailed on January 4th, 2024. The application for this project, the application files for the project were only made available online at the reference link under the notice, in the notice on the January 10th, 2024. So that's when the notices went out, people couldn't get the application. I feel that means that the notice was ineffective. It's incomplete. So that's comment 1.
I'm going to cut you off because I want to allow other people the chance to speak. If we have time to come back to you, we will. But I don't want you taking advantage of the situation. We need to be able to hear from everybody. I provided you an opportunity within 5 minutes.
I've stopped my clock when you cut me off, and I'm at 6 minutes, 24 seconds. So every time you cut me off, I stop the clock. You can cut me off if you want.
Wait a second. Basically, we talked about 5 minutes. You're over 5 minutes. And we just need to be able to hear from everybody in the audience. I think that's a respectful thing to do. We appreciate the time that you put into this, but we do need to make sure that everybody has an opportunity.
If you would stop interrupting me, I could have probably gotten through this a lot quicker. So my opinion is that you don't like my comments here. And
I'm not saying that at all. I'm trying to provide everybody a fair chance to speak.
Are you going to cut me off, or do you want to let me finish?
I'd like you to wrap it up. I'll give you 2 minutes to wrap up your comments. Okay?
All right, I'm going to start my
How's that?
clock again because I just put my
That's
files
fine.
away. All right, I'm just going to go for it. So that was the public hearing notice. And, how are people supposed to be able to understand the application if they can't get the files? And as far as the traffic engineering analysis, I do have a question about that. How does that process work? Because I went through hundreds of applications for similar to this to find that traffic engineering data. Every application included the plots from the IT manual. This application did not. Every other application includes the calculations. This one did not. So how was that review process done? if you can't replicate the calculations, there's just a few numbers in there, and then and then we have the values. And I just demonstrated that the values for that there's a huge gulf there. And section 1869-6 states that traffic analysis must use the most recent version of the Institute of Traffic Engineers Manual Trip Generation. What version of the Institute of Traffic Engineering Trip Generation Manual did the Wentworth Partners and Associates use to create their traffic estimates? Why was the traffic analysis amended? What facts, figures, statements, and calculations were changed? The town planner stated in an email that's actually repeat. That's the review process. It really, I'm just interested in knowing, like, for question 4, where's the why is there a huge discrepancy there? And as far as my calculation and theirs. And did Wentworth Partners and Associates, Pike Developers, or High Tide Capital perform any hazardous material testing, including but not limited to asbestos, lead based paint, lead based drinking water, PCBs, radon, et cetera? And will any part of this property have commercial storefront?
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I do appreciate you letting me finish. Thank you very much.
And it's not a question of whether we like comments or not. We try to provide equal opportunities for everybody. So thank you. I'm going to ask the engineer to please come up. We're going to tackle a couple of these right off the bat. Could you elaborate a little bit on the collection of your data from, for the traffic portion?
Yeah, so we did use the ITE, and I can't read the questions from here, but I think the only problem with his analysis seems to be the peak hour component. So the peak hour, as you saw, was 7 to 9 a.m. That still gets divided into the hour, right? So a peak hour would be, so it's not, I think you had 45 or something showing on the screen there, and that would still be divided by each hour, as that's the movement of traffic within that hour. So that was one of the things that I just caught right off the bat. I didn't have a chance to, again, probably because he was moving pretty quickly, I didn't have a chance to read through all of the analysis he did there. We did not do that analysis. We simply went to the ITE for both the 220 and the 225 analysis, and used their simple form basically. And what I was looking for when I was doing that was just triggers. So the trigger being that 100 cars, and knowing that we're nowhere close, and even his numbers were nowhere close to triggering what I would call a full traffic study. This was actually a waiver request within our application, which is why you didn't see in any of the calculations. So in our application, we did a waiver request because we know we weren't going to be anywhere close to that. So putting out, it's $3,200, but it would have been about $3,200 to have a traffic analysis done. I generally use VHB as my traffic engineering team, if you will. And I just didn't feel that $3,200 was warranted when I saw that the numbers were so far below. So I'm not a traffic engineer as well. I'm a civil engineer, structural engineer is my areas of competence. However, I could do my math and see that the numbers were so far below that 100 that they were not going to trigger any DOT permitting or any DOT figures. And then from the main DOT websites, I could also see what the road designs were all built for. And in each one of these cases, the roads were built for 1,000 cars per day, an ADDT count of 1,000 and an ADDT count of 500. So again, even the roads weren't triggered. And then following that one step further, we went and looked at the intersection counts for each intersection that was around our development, and we saw that they were all basically F studies. They were all, I'm sorry, opposite way. The roads are F, and the intersections were all A intersections. None of them had any impact except for where Mill Street ties into Main Street or where Pine Street ties into Main Street. And that was really related to the sets of lights. So it was mostly the traffic that was on Route 2 that were causing those.
And it sounds like there was a thorough discussion with town staff.
Yep.
About this issue,
Yeah, I want to just,
Public Works Director and the town engineer.
yeah, I just want to respond to the questions about the traffic analysis and the amendment. As was mentioned, there was initially a waiver request. I wasn't comfortable with that waiver request at that point. If this had been scheduled for, let's say, our December meeting, they would have gotten a negative recommendation from me there. So I sent it to our traffic peer reviewer for their take on it, because again, I'm also not a traffic engineer, so I wanted someone to review their waiver request for the full traffic analysis. They said that they were not comfortable with it without additional information, with namely the AADT for the streets surrounding this parcel and additional ITE traffic information, which was provided by the applicants. This whole project in general is always reviewed by our civil engineering peer reviewer, as well as our public works director, who didn't raise any flags related to this project.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Yeah, so peer reviews, you addressed that. I did see a note, there was one of the questions for the applicant, he mentioned no mention of hazardous materials testing. I remembered I think I saw in your construction notes that you excluded that. Oh, said that you, as part of your work, you didn't look into any of those hazardous material testing, including but not limited to asbestos, lead-based paint, lead-based drinking water, PCBs, radon, et cetera. Do we even have, I mean, for a review standard or a criteria? I
That's
saw you had a note on your plan that
Yeah.
says you didn't address that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we have anything.
We don't have a specific review criteria to get that kind of testing done, and or requirement to do so. So they have
Yeah.
not. What we do have a requirement about is about the storage of hazardous materials, but that's not.
Right.
What
The
you're asking.
application for the natural gas line was there was a phase 1 involved. If you remember, there was significant environmental contamination. That question came up. We discussed it at length. I haven't heard anything from this project that there's similar issues as there was with the gas station and the use of fluids, some of those typical things, but I haven't heard anything. Are you aware of any environmental hazards as part of what you're doing? Just
Now, before the purchase of the property, which happened in that process that you guys were going through to do the contract zone, the previous, the new owners had gone through the ESA process, doing their due diligence, and all the identified hazardous wastes, or not waste, all the identified hazards within the building were all part of, were all addressed when they did the demo and the demolition plan.
Okay.
So all of that stuff's actually already happened prior to and at risk, I guess. But that all happened with the demo permits that we did. And again, the building, all that process has already happened. The building's
Okay.
been demoed on the inside.
And we already addressed the issue of no commercial storefronts. That was taken off. the table.
That's correct. Yeah. Isabel had explained that you have no commercial interest in this.
Thank you. Do we have other members of the audience that please step up and state your name?
I'm still Chris Bates, and this time up for the right item on your agenda here. And I had a few things that mostly were about the contract zoning agreement that I would just like some clarification on if possible. And so basically, in that first agreement, I think there are about 6 of them in that contract zoning agreement letter. It talks about a section that talks about honoring the setbacks that are going to be there. And then it says, except as explicitly modified by the terms of this contract zone agreement. And there's no specificity after that. I'm wondering if what changes have been made, what accommodations, and if you could share them with us if they have been made.
You want to take that, Isabel?
Yeah, because that area, you know, I live on Mill Street as well. And so that area is quite dear to me. And I am mindful and I'm thankful that you folks earlier threw out a question about the parking area and the amount of speed, the square footage, et cetera, all like that. And you'll see, and you probably have, that is an exceptionally tight area. And when that building does get removed, the metal building, I think we're going to see a couple of things that need addressing in between, you know, where you could put a berm or a cosmetic sort of berm that would work for all of the folks. Because the last few houses or a couple houses are pretty much down low. Yeah, at that point.
So with regard to your question on how it's been modified, so
Yeah.
in the contract zone is available in tonight's Google Drive file, but in B2, it notes all structures and uses shall meet or exceed the dimensional requirements of the VC district set forth in section 18106F or within the shoreland area of the Shoreland General Development District set forth in 18274, except as follows. And then it has 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And those are related to some of the items that I already talked about in my presentation. So the principal structure, floor area, and footprint shall not be expanded except for emergency ingress and egress and decks and patios. Any new accessory structure located on the subject premises shall meet the setback requirements of the MDR district. The maximum number of dwelling units to be located in the 74 Mill Street structure shall be 30. The maximum number of bedrooms per dwelling unit shall be 3, and there shall be no more than 5 3-bedroom dwelling units total on the subject premises. And to maintain the primarily residential aspect of the subject premises, the commercial unit, which is again, is not applicable because the commercial units ended up being removed. Yeah.
Okay, I was more concerned about the area down back there because living there, you could see that boathouse or whatever it will become. I can't even imagine that 70 feet back as is. So I think all the people talking about ingress and egress, I think these are very important. You know, the ship has maybe sailed in some ways, but in the future, to get more people involved would be good. I think Spring Street's a pretty good sized street, but you know, I'm concerned they're going to have to broaden that or take away a few feet from each person who has a house bordering on Spring Street. Simply because right now there have been trucks delivering for months, these retaining walls for, I don't know where they went, but then they went away. They probably went to another place. But even that truck couldn't get down there. So it took them half a day to forklift one piece at a time, which, you know, of course, in construction is not all that efficient. It's sometimes necessary, but it's not always that efficient. And talking about the medium density residential stuff is kind of an area that I wanted to mention as well, especially in light of what we learned tonight, that there won't be the commercial places that we had originally thought that there might be. It is currently a medium residential area and it doesn't need to change. So I don't think there's ever been a reason to go to village commercial kind of thing there. It's going to be noisy enough and different enough now. And as you know, noise travels better than most things, right? Up, down, vertical, fast, all of that. So I think that noise is going to continue to be a problem. And it's probably a broader question than just those of us who abut that property, but everyone that in that whole area of the tough end. There's still a lot of families there. Okay. And I worry about the road costs and who's going to handle all those road costs when we have to widen and keep tearing up things so that they can get this apartment building in there. So those were just a couple of things that I wanted to mention, and I appreciate your vigilance and continuing to ask questions when folks come up here and talk.
Thank you. I do want to address a couple of your points. The bigger picture for everybody in the audience, you know, there is an opportunity coming up when the town is going to renew their comprehensive plan. So a lot of the issues that we're talking about, whether it's road width or speed or lighting on streets, all of those kinds of things, we're going to have a really detailed discussion about, you know, charting the course for Orono for the next 10 years. This planning board happened to make up a bunch of the the committee the last time, and will be participating again. Mr. Cross in the audience also was on that comprehensive plan committee. So it's a really good opportunity to see what your town's about, participate in the process, and if there are changes, they can bring them to people's attention, and we can discuss them and perhaps change policy, that kind of thing. So that is upcoming. What's the latest? When do we start?
I believe the council is actually considering taking something up about that at
Okay,
don't quote me on it, a meeting this month.
yeah, stay tuned.
Okay, well,
Basically,
thanks. I appreciate
It's
you
a good
being
opportunity.
prudent about that, but I think that whole parking lot thing is going to need more attention. Ingress, egress, nobody wants it to go in or come out right on their doorstep. But seriously, can you imagine getting a fire truck down there? I mean, you've got Mill Street, but
Very good.
in terms of critical response, there's some thinking I think we still have to do, even though this thing is already moving.
Very good. Thank you
Thanks.
very much.
Uh,
Other comments? You had your hand up. You're up.
My name's Lila. I live on Middle Street, and I just had a clarifying question. It
Your
sounded
last
like
name, for the record?
Dorfler, Lila Dorfler. It sounded like online that the traffic wouldn't reach the capacity that is there right now. So will there be any changes made to the roads or anything? But now it sounds like maybe more information is needed. So I was just curious about traffic.
Yep, I'll let you take that one.
So occasionally, for, traffic, in the way of 100 trips at peak hour or more, they will be required to do off-site improvements where the developer is responsible for road widening or even pedestrian improvements. At this point, that has not been recommended by the Public Works Director. We had a fairly lengthy conversation about sort of what we might be able to request of these applicants, given the traffic information that was submitted. And at this point, we were kind of in agreement that what additional off-site improvements, road widening, were not required as part of this.
Sorry. Please do. I hate to be a stickler, but these are recorded.
So the second question was about if there were going to be any required stop signs. I think you were going to say off-site.
Yes, it's
Okay.
more a question for the town. Like, are there any speed limit signs or issues around speeding and traffic more in the larger neighborhood, not for the developers?
So for this specific development, that no off-site improvements are being asked for of the applicants. I do know that the town has been pursuing other plans and transportation improvements on Main Street and at some other areas of the community. But at this point, this specific Mill Street adjacent, there are no off-site improvements being proposed.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Other questions?
We have a hand raised online.
Yeah, okay, we have one more in-house and then we'll go online. John?
Too long. I have a few questions. I live on, my name is John Bradson, Bradson. I live on 1 Summer Street. I was wondering, I'm interested in the idea of having your bioderm, which I think is a good idea. Consider what we know now about runoff going into rivers and lakes. And I was wondering off the cuff if that canal could be used in the restoration of a bioderm. Actually, that canal actually could run from Lower Summer Street all the way down there and collect water from.
Could you elaborate? I missed something from the first question. You wanted to hear more information about the bio?
No, I'm glad to see that a biodome is being
Okay,
proposed.
yeah.
But I wonder if the biodome could be incorporated into where the canal is to make it into a marsh
Where the-
biodome.
Yeah, there's a lot of limitations, what you can feel this one. if you want to step up, but usually you can't.
I don't
do
want to spend that much
within
time. It's just, it's just an
Yeah,
idea.
yeah,
that
yeah.
popped out.
No, that's fine.
The other things I'm talking about is, you didn't really mention, you're talking about the possibility of, I think, 30 bedrooms. 30 apartments rather.
Yes.
Yep.
How many bedrooms?
It's a table in the application.
58
I
or
just don't remember right off.
51 bedrooms. Is that-
51, yeah.
Okay.
Is that correct? No, I'm assuming if there are 51 bedrooms, I'm assuming probably that they're probably close to at least 51. Yeah, 51 cars. So you're about in the ballpark down at 49 spaces, right?
57.
We had a discussion, I remember at the comp plan, a pretty lengthy discussion about traffic and the concerns, because they came up then. And there was some mention about students and maybe not everybody having cars. And then there was the bicycle discussion. I did see in the application, you had mention of alternative transportation. So I think
Yeah,
there was other things factored in.
I think in reality though, every
Yeah.
person probably, there's probably a car to each bedroom, basically.
Yeah.
So I think you're probably pretty much in the ballpark in that one. That's pretty good. The other thing I was considering, are there sidewalks on Spring Street?
I don't know that.
No.
Not on Spring. There are sidewalks existing across the street on Mill Street.
I know, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Is that something that would be consideration? I mean, are people be walking down that street to go into the parking lot? The street is not
Did
that
come up
large.
during staff review? I'm just thinking of pedestrian access, or would they come out of the parking lot up the stairs and access Mill Street sidewalks? I don't know what would be. How often would people walk out of the parking lot? I don't know. That's a good question.
The Spring Street conversation didn't specifically come up in my conversation with the Public Works Director. We talked about more connection to the existing sidewalk on Mill Street from the entrance courtyard and potentially requiring a crosswalk or some sort of flashing beacon or something. Yeah.
Okay.
So that sounds like, again, flag this for a future discussion about pedestrian, because again, our whole last comp plan was the pedestrian safety, walkability.
Right.
It was a really huge issue. So that falls kind of into this discussion, which might be an off-site improvement.
The other question I was going to ask you, maybe it's on there, I didn't see, but how many windows do you know will be facing my property on 1 Summer Street? Do you know how many windows?
You?
Zach Pike here. I don't have the exact count in front of me. It's the exact same number of windows that was there before.
Okay.
So I don't have the exact number, but it's historically what has been there is the same number of windows that was there.
Okay. And the other thing, Zach, while you're there, what is the building going to be clad in?
So based on the historic standards of the building and the approval from the National Park Service, historically, the building had 1x4 clapboards that was on the exterior of the building. They were able to determine that by looking at the nailing pattern and old historic photos of the building. So we have a 1x4 smooth clapboard siding planned for it. There's lots of different products that are 1x4 clapboard siding, but it will look like a historic clapboard siding building.
And material, do you have any idea on that?
Currently, we've been looking at something called an LP Smart Side, which is like a very green, energy efficient wood product, but it's much more resistant to the weather.
Okay.
But it's a wood product, a composite wood product, I believe would be the term.
All right.
No problem.
And you mentioned noise control. You mentioned noise control. Is the town still, is it 7 to 7 for construction? Is that correct?
Yes, it is 7 to 7, and any complaints are typically handled by the code enforcement office. And it's based on decibel level, not on on like this property, but on the surrounding properties. So decibel level for the MDR zoning district in this case. Yeah.
And the other thing that I have concern on is you've brought up several times tonight, 5 Summer Street. And you talked about maybe buffering or things like that. But my point in that is that 5 Summer Street was never included
in the discussions on the zoning change.
Correct.
Now, if 5 Summer Street had been included on the discussions, would that have changed some of our approaches to the acceptability of this project or the project itself at all?
I wondered that because in the summary, you talked about there are 2 sites is what you called it in your summary, but then I noticed there's the 3rd parcel. So I was trying to
I mean,
figure out what that piece was, but that just seemed like
I
you,
feel technically that 5 Summer Street has nothing to do with this hearing whatsoever.
I'll defer to you. Because that changed since the last time. So could you expand on that?
John, do you mind if I expand on that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Zach Pike here once again. When the contract zone change for the project was accepted, we did not own 5 Summer Street.
Mhm.
And then it happened to come on the market. It was on the open market
Right,
for other people to
right.
purchase, and we purchased it.
Right.
So in the consideration with the contract zone change, 5 Summer Street wasn't involved, and we purchased it after the contract zone
Right.
change had already been approved.
Right.
For
this-
mostly for if there's like if there's an easement issue for a fence or something along those lines is really what it is.
But is there anything proposed on 5 Summer Street that we're reviewing tonight?
We have no.
I didn't see
no
anything in the
change of
plan.
any
Is it-
sort to the property, and we understand that in I believe in the
But you
recommendation.
mentioned decks, you mentioned, I mean, where are these things?
So right here, the deck that we're talking about is right here on the back side
Okay.
of the building. So this is 5
Correct.
Summer Street. This is your property here, sir.
Correct.
And in the contract zone change, there was ingresses and egresses, as well as this particular deck structure, which is in the confines of the footprint of these 2 structures.
Mhm.
So that's the only thing I believe is, and it's already because this building, part of the building is so close to the property line right here. So we're just staying within the same scope of the property line that the building already imposes on what would be the natural town ordinance that we should be this far away from the town property line.
Legally non-conforming.
Right, it's legally, right, it's already legally non-conforming.
Okay,
Very good. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Other comments? Yeah, we do have one online. Thank you. Yeah, we'll take online. Mitch?
The hand is down, so I don't know if it's
All
back
right,
up
yep.
again. Hold on. Jennifer, you should be good to talk.
Thank you. I was having some network issues, so I lost you for a while and my hand was lowering and raising, so I apologize for that. So I have a property at 100 Mill Street. It is a family property that I've purchased and am renting as a duplex. So my concerns are Spring Street and the traffic going up and down that street. But I raised my hand when somebody was talking about widening the street. I will tell you that with the work that's been happening with the mill, that and even with snow plowing, I have a lot of trucks that go over my property. And the people there from the mill have been very gracious and very apologetic of any of their trucks that are going over. But there is, I just wanted it to be noted that while I certainly wouldn't want, obviously, the street to be widened to the impact to my property, it is very difficult for plows and for trucks to get down that street. And my property bears the witness of that. I also would say that I am concerned for the people that are in my units, that they are losing a little bit of privacy because of the traffic that is primarily going up and down that street. I do own a condo on the other side of Orono. I seem to be having be building a Orono condos for some reason. My mother has lived there forever, and so she lives in a condo with 20 units on the other side of this on the other side of Orono. So, and I'm the treasurer of that association, so I'm very aware of plowing and traffic and the impact of just 20 units, of how that impacts traffic and how things are can be interesting to deal with. So I am not opposed to improving Orono. I have, you know, clear ties to that area from a family perspective, but I will say that I am very concerned about Spring Street and the amount of traffic going up and down, and how do I personally have happy tenants when I am definitely changing the traffic flow going up and down my property. So just a few comments.
Thank you. I think we've discussed the traffic at length. Those comments, again, just add to the discussion we've already had. Do you have anything more to add to that? I mean, Spring Street is off your property. You're gonna generate, you provided us with traffic data. We've had town review. Is there anything else to add on traffic that you'd like to share?
You know, I think a lot of the questions are concerns that I would have if this was my neighborhood. And I'm glad they're being asked. I think, you know, we need to remember that historically, when Buyer Factory was operating, I think 42 cars were going in and out of there at the same times every day. So those peak traffic hours were peak traffic. 42 cars were going in at 1 hour and 42 cars were coming out in that 1 hour. The way that the housing set up, so the 220 or the 225, that's not going to be the case. You know, not everybody's going to be going to work at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. So we're not going to, and you know, we just heard another gentleman, 51 cars. So you can see where like 33 cars all leaving in 1 hour is probably not reasonable with that, with your numbers. And that's, I guess, what I wanted to get across here. I did hear, and I just want, you know, even according to the drawings, we got to remember where roads are and where right-of-ways are two different things. And so when she's saying that, when Ms. Hamilton was saying that cars were going onto her property or plows are going onto her property, I believe technically they were in the right-of-way. People tend to think that they own the grass right to the road, but the reality is, you know, I didn't do 100, that her house is on the opposite side here. But you know, there's approximately an 8-foot buffer on one side, and I believe that's the same on the opposite side as well, that makes up the right of way. So chances are, even the town plow truck isn't technically on her property, or even the trucks that, you know, may be bringing in some of the materials right now. I guess that's all I'll bring to the table. Oh, I did want to bring up one other item, and this came down to the PUC 225 rating. When I was doing the research on the multifamily, which would be for people who was a college, basically people going to college. I found 6 papers from around the country that were talking about that specifically. And generally speaking, what they had tuned into was they looked at each bedroom and they took for a peak hour traffic, they were saying the peak hour traffic could happen and be about half of the bedrooms. So the amount of people leaving a building would be about half for that particular use group. And it's different from multifamily. Multifamily was a lot less than that because they were saying it was, which is what we're really proposing here. But if this was to become college dorms for undergrad students, I wanted to make sure we were including both so that we weren't falsely representing what may or may not happen in the building once it's fully rented out. But in that, about half the students would be leaving in that peak hour traffic. Around the country, what we were finding, or what I was seeing in those reports, is only 10% of those would actually be in vehicles, because this would be college. These are college towns. They had to be college towns, dorms within the same. The papers I was looking at were papers that were for college towns where this multi-family or multi-unit housing was within walking, within biking, or within public transportation routes. So only 10% of that traffic would actually be using vehicles. The rest would either be pedestrian or bicycle or some other means of traffic. So of that, let's say the 51 cars in this case, or 51 beds, 26 of them would be leaving at one time, of which only 5 would be actually leaving in a car. And I interpreted that, and I put that in my write-up, as I was saying, I'm going to be ultra conservative with that number. And I'm going to say 35% are leaving by car in the morning. And then I'm going to say all 50% are coming back in the afternoon. So the numbers that I represented on my report used all 50% coming back and leaving at those peak hour traffics. Again, I feel we were ultra conservative when we did these numbers based on the reports that I was seeing, or based on these papers and submittals that I was seeing from around the country, where that number was spread out between modes of transportation.
You should advertise to tenants about the BAT bus.
Yes.
And use public transit.
Yep. So, and so if I'm leaving now, I'm going to say thank you very much. This has actually been very great, and I appreciate all the conversations.
Yes, we have another comment, please.
Marcy Bushner, 15 Middle Street. This is a little bit of a tangential. When there is a problem with traffic, which there's going to be, it's 30 units. Who do we ask about it? I mean, there's speeding, or we need a stop sign. Who do we address? Is it you or somebody else?
I know, see, that there's neighborhood groups, and I know the town has instituted an effort to meet with neighborhoods and figure out what the problems are. I know I live in the Webster neighborhood, and I know they've had a meeting about where I live. I imagine that there's other discussions. So that, I mean, that's just a neighborhood discussion so that town officials can understand these types of concerns that have come up tonight. But if there's ever, I mean, public safety and code office, or if there's any land use or, violations in town ordinances, those kinds of things. So what do you have to add,
I
Isabel?
would just add, I think in general, if the concern is over speeding, of course, the police department. And then if the concern is really over more infrastructure, I guess, signage, stop signs, public works. And if it's with a land use approval specifically, like on this property, the code enforcement office. So a couple of different ways to reach out.
Okay,
But
thank you. That's good to know.
Yeah.
And
But I do know there was those neighborhood discussions, because it
Yeah,
happens. It was interesting, an opportunity to voice some concerns,
Good.
as well as the comp plan again.
the what?
The comprehensive plan, when we redo that, that's another
Right,
opportunity
And
to,
that's sometime this month. Yeah, that's a great opportunity.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful that the Buyer building is going to be saved and something done with it. We're just all sad about the cars. Cars.
thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other questions, comments? Mitch, anybody online?
No hands raised online.
Very good. Last call for comments from the audience. All right, I'm gonna close the public hearing. We're gonna stick to any remaining comments from the board. We've had quite a bit of good discussion this evening. All right, there's a really long findings of fact that you provided for us. I'm glad I don't have to read that in the record, but in the presentation that Isabel made at the start, we talked about proposed findings of fact, so we're going to enter into that stage. We've also added, based on the discussion tonight, I think we've had a discussion about how to deal with proposed screening or buffering after the metal building goes down, because there's a situation right now, we can't predict what that's going to look like. We had a couple comments about that. So it'd be nice if that was included in one of the conditions. Similar to, again, we've used the example of the Main State Police Station when that turned over to car dealership. Were there any other conditions? I'm not recalling any. I didn't write any more down. Any
No.
other? Okay, you
No.
don't recall any.
It was the buffer was the only one, and
Yeah.
he made a good point that they may not want it.
Right.
As I thought about it, I don't know if I'd want it. I'd want to
Yeah,
see the
to
river.
obscure the view.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think if we,
Add it to the, as a
yeah,
condition
but
to
just
work
a
with the neighbors.
condition that, it, you know, I can resolve it at a later date when they know what it's gonna look like, that would make sense.
Sure.
Okay. I think we are ready for a motion. Actually, yeah, propose, so we need a motion. Oh, well. One thing first, we talked earlier about the waiver. Are we proceeding with that?
So I think I have some direction from you all. I wanted to bring it to your attention, but I don't have a good place in my memo to do that. I don't think that you need to make a formal waiver about the conflicting standards. I think we had the discussion.
I'm talking about the waiver of your identification of that subdivision and
Site plan review or
site
something.
plan review.
Yes.
Before we needed to vote on that.
Yes. So in your packet, I've provided some information. This goes back to a 2018 state subdivision exemption. So essentially, Maine is a very unique state with its subdivision laws, which follow state statute rather than local. And Maine had a law that at the time, up until 2018, apartment units also went through subdivision review, which is a little bit odd. Normally, we think of subdivisions as just lots. So in 2018, there was a state subdivision exemption added, and I cited that law in my memo to you all. Basically, they noted that for towns, typically a little bit larger, that have adopted site plan review ordinances that address essentially the state criteria for subdivisions, those towns can make an exemption and review projects only through site plan rather than subdivision. This both site plan and subdivision, as would have been required pre-2018. This is also kind of ties in with the state's general goal towards increased housing production and helping alleviate some of the housing pressure in the state. So I have made some information in your packet sort of about how our site plan review standards mimic both our local subdivision standards and the state's criteria for the exemption. I also put together, if you would find it appropriate, a suggested motion in this case, just so that we have
On
something.
page 7 of her review.
Yeah.
The motion's on page 8.
Yes.
Yes.
Wow.
Just so we have something for the findings, and just for your knowledge, I ran this suggested motion through our town attorney, who blessed it for something for the findings document.
Very good. Yeah, the table lays all the review criteria and how we meet that, and again, that seems to make sense, and based on town recommendations, we're gonna consider a waiver request for that so that we're only focused on site plan review. There we go.
So that should come first.
It will come first. We're gonna vote on that now. So there's a suggested motion in the packet. If somebody wants to jump in, you're ready.
I'll
You're
jump.
ready. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I move to find that the Town of Orono Code of Ordinances, Article 6, Section 18-177. There's Latin there. Et sweet.
Oh.
Governing site plan review standards is at least equivalent to the town's subdivision standards in Article 7, Section 18-210 et seq. And addresses all statutory review criteria established in Title 30 MRSA 4402.6. Therefore, the project is subject to municipal site plan review only and does not require subdivision review.
Thank you. That's good. Can I have a second?
Second.
Does everybody understand that, what we're doing? That the state has simplified a process. Isabel correctly noted that and has simplified.
Can this
the
stand
review.
forevermore, or do we have to do it every time?
Technically, as it's drafted right now, you would have to do it every time, but we can talk about adopting a bylaw or something to make it stand.
Okay, but
Okay.
good catch on her part. So there's any further discussion on that? Everybody understand that? All right, Jessica, please.
For the approval of the waiver for 74 Mill Street, Lisa Buck,
Yes.
Phil Rock,
Approved. Yep.
Judd McIntosh,
Approved.
Michael Costello,
Approved.
John Beckett,
Yes.
Krista Schwenzer.
Yes,
That's 6 for approval, none opposed.
Very good. Next up, we've got that out of the way. We're ready for a motion. Actually, how are we doing proposed findings of facts? So we need a motion on that, correct? Or I'm trying to remember process. This is new.
So I've also put together a suggested motion that I've run by the town attorney that encompasses both the findings of fact and the conditions that I drafted.
Yep.
If you add anything else, you'll need to specify any additional conditions.
Got it. Bear with us. We're getting used to a newer process. Thank you.
Where's that written?
All right, so
Page 9. Yeah, you want me
Yeah.
to-
you can take this one.
The additional amendment, that I've written here is work with the neighbors, on the,
And the staff, I think it's the group of them. So applicant,
and
town
town staff.
staff, and, abutters, neighbors, whatever, to,
Discuss for.
discuss appropriate buffering and screening, something like that.
When the building's torn down.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be fine.
So work with the neighbors and the town staff, on an appropriate buffer. Is that enough?
Yeah.
I move to approve the site plan application of 74 Mill Street LLC dated November 17th, 2023, and revised through January 10th, 2024 to renovate the existing Buyer Factory Mill and adjacent building to a total of 30 residential units with on-site storage, parking, sidewalks, and landscaping located at 74 and 80 Mill Street. Further findings of fact included in the meeting packet and dated January 17th, 2024, subject to the following conditions. I need to read all these in, or just the added one?
Just the addition.
Okay, and with one addition to the already included conditions. That the applicant work with neighbors and town staff on an adequate buffer.
That works. Further discussion, we've covered a lot of these things in length. We're not going through each of the individual findings, but again, I think we've had some great discussion this evening. Do you have anything more to add?
I do not.
Yeah, do I have there was a motion. I need a
I second.
Okay, very good. Any further discussion? Yes.
Yeah, just for clarity, that was the site plan review. Does that also include the floodplain management and the shoreline?
Yeah, the findings included all of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. So it was second, further discussion. Anything more we want to touch on? All right, Jessica.
For the approval of the site plan review for 74 Mill Street, Lisa Buck,
Yes.
Phil Rock,
Approved.
Judd McIntosh,
Approved.
Michael Costello,
Also approved.
John Beckett,
Approved.
Krista Schwenzer.
approved.
That's 6 for approval, none opposed.
Thank you, Jessica. Very good. Next up is, well, do we want to have any discussion? Usually we have an item in here, so I'm gonna go off script here. What do we have on next month? To look forward to.
At least at this time, I have not received any applications for the February meeting.
Okay, I do want to bring up a point. We heard this evening that timing on sufficient review just trying to figure out, because this is likely gonna come up again. So I'm just wondering how we can address,
We have to roll
Timely-
it back. We have to roll it back.
yeah, so
People
timely
next to month.
submission so that abutters and residents of Orono have time to review that, because we heard two comments tonight. One, they'd never seen the document, so just for those of you that remain, abutters notices go out, and there's always full-size plan sets available for review at the town office. It takes a little bit of effort on your part to come in here. I think, are they available electronically too for people to look at? I'm just trying to recall
I think so.
all the ways we try to get the info out.
Yeah, so I wanted to address that as well. The application materials that we received were included in the public planning board folder at least 14 days in advance. I will be upfront that I went in and added the additional submission information as well as my proposed findings of fact and review memo to the folder and renumbered everything so it was easy to find. And that was not until the 10th when you all also received your packets.
Okay.
Sure.
Just as a process note, when I mail out the abutters cards that same day, because it says on them materials are available online, I go through and make sure that everything that we have at the moment that Isabel isn't still working on goes into that folder.
Yeah.
And then we add other materials as they are finished.
We hear this commonly, that people don't have information, don't get notice, and I tell you, we are doing the best we can for all the avenues that we have to get information out there. It's a discussion we have repeatedly, so we are doing our best. There's probably always room for improvement, but this evening, there was a request to try to get information earlier so that interested parties can review and provide comment on a timely basis, because the comment was made, and I'm gonna second this, I don't want to see anything more than a paragraph the night of a meeting,
Mhm.
because we just don't have time to consider that.
So I will note, just for the benefit of the public, but as the board is aware, I am pursuing sort of the internal process improvements about how we're communicating with applicants. I am trying to sort of set expectations that I need sufficient time to review things and to put together the multiple many-page findings of fact documents that I do. So we are working on internal process improvements, but I would be interested in hearing from the public or from board members if there is anything further that we could be doing around sort of noticing. A lot of that is regulated by the ordinance, but just, you know, from a process standpoint, I am interested in considering those recommendations from the public as we're working through updating those.
Sure, let's hear it.
Suggestion, John Bradson again, 1 Summer Street. As a suggestion, when I was on council many moons ago, I pushed this and pushed this and pushed this and it never went anywhere with anyone, but why can't you have these easels and these drawings in this nice foyer that we have out here, 10 days or whatever time it would take before your meetings, so that I, as a citizen, can come down on my own and take a look at those. And if a packet's available, I can read the packet at my leisure and study those drawings instead of waiting until.
Being that in times past, I
I
remember.
don't
the
understand
project,
why
but it's been a
why we
while.
don't do that.
Yeah, no, good point.
I mean, that's would be no effort on, I don't think on your part greatly.
Yeah.
If they're available and they're ready.
Yeah.
And that's something that we could.
Yeah.
You're
I don't
open,
like
you're
hearing
open.
that comment that people either haven't gotten the notice, and we try to just get the word out, but the information is available. People need to know how to find it, but if that's simpler, maybe that's a easy solution.
A nice use of our building.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Got it. Yeah.
Payson Wells, 23 College Ave. So I believe Chairman Ruck, you said that you don't want to see more than a paragraph of comment. Is that correct? In future meetings?
Yes, we don't have enough time. We're here to review, and that's why years past, we requested sufficient time for us to do our internal review. I mean,
Okay.
this takes time. We're volunteers that are up here doing this.
I understand.
So again, sufficient time, but I cannot be handed a detailed document and expect me to read it during the meeting. That's just not going to happen.
Okay, I understand. So my comment is that this is a municipal building and I would need to do some research on this, and we are members of the public. So if you try to limit the speech or cut people off, that could actually be a First Amendment issue. And I believe there is some statutes on that from the Supreme Court. So again, I need to verify that, but I just want to let you know that might be something that would come up if you try to limit what people can present.
Okay, I try to follow town policy. Town council is
Yeah.
pretty similar. And when there's enough people in the audience, I'm very mindful about giving everybody their time. And if one resident dominates that time, it doesn't allow others a chance to participate.
I understand.
So-
On that fairness note, I'll be happy to work with you in the future if you want me to go last to give other people if I need to go spend a lot of time.
We're gonna
just letting you know.
I'll give you a heads up. We're
Yeah.
gonna stick with that 5 minutes. I'm not gonna,
Okay.
this isn't just open mic night.
Okay, I just, wanted to mention that might be an issue if you start cutting people off. Yep, thank you very much.
Got it. All right. So I think we're trying to make improvements. I appreciate the comments. Thanks for your time spending your evening with us this evening. I think we're ready for adjournment. I have a motion, please.
Second.
Second, any further discussion? Jessica, one last time.
For adjournment of the January Planning Board meeting, Lisa Buck,
Yes.
Phil Ruck,
Yes.
Judd McIntosh,
Yes.
Michael Costello,
Yes.
John Beckett, Krista Schwenser.
Yes.
6 for approval, none opposed.
Very good. See you in a month or two.